Welcome to the Suburban K9 podcast, episode 1. Today we're talking about why are there so many aggressive dogs out there? Are there more than there used to be? Why are dogs biting people, attacking people, killing people? It's happening all too frequently. There's 3 of us here today, and we're going to dive into what's causing this. For those of you who don't know, my name is Matt Covey. I'm the founder of Suburban K9. Also, we have here Mr. Nelson Madrano, one of our awesome trainers. And we also have Mr. Alexander Chadish. So today's video and today's podcast should be a lot of fun. What we did is we haven't scripted this. Nelson and I just took some time and we thought about independently just some things we see on a daily basis as trainers that lead to a lot of aggression in dogs. We submitted those topics to Alex. We did not talk about, between Nelson and I, what's on our list. So Alex is going to be, I guess, the moderator today, for the lack of a better word. And he will kick us off, and he's going to keep us on track, and I think let us know what Nelson and I have in common, what we disagree on, and we'll go from there. And I just want to throw out, for those of you watching, we've got a couple topics on here I think are going to be a little bit controversial, but when you hear our opinions, hear them out and really think about it, because none of this is meant to pick on anybody, but there are a few things that are going to ruffle some feathers, and I want you to hear this from a dog trainer's standpoint.
It's a fight night
Alex.
now that we have a moderator.
You two better behave.
That's important. And we each get, there's rules, right? We each get like 30 seconds, and then you cut the mic so the next person can go. Yeah, okay.
But I think there's 30 seconds, and then you yell for the next 20, right? Isn't that how that...
Well, you yell and you talk over the other person for at least 2/3 of what they're trying to say.
Got it.
Oh, I'm going to be great at that. Okay. Well, Alex, start us off. Where do we begin?
All right.
Why are there so many aggressive dogs? What's causing
Well,
it?
got your guys' list. You had 2 in common. So I figure we'll start there, and then we'll kind of bounce back and forth on the rest of them. So the first one you guys had in common was socialization. So, Covey.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah. and it's not a surprise that I started us off with it. So, Covey, why don't you go ahead and just talk about socialization a bit?
Okay, I will start. I'm going to assume people watching know about socializing and what it is, but it's, we won't spend a lot of time on the easy part, but it's really just teaching your dog what's normal in the world, right? And I think the thing people don't realize is that dogs are very close to being a wild animal. So things they don't encounter in their early life, they are primed to distrust. And so I think a lot of people don't think about the deeper part of socialization and the idea that if a dog in the wild has never seen an elephant, and it hits a year old and it sees an elephant and it's like, oh, that seems nice and friendly, I'm going to go say hi, that dog is going to die, right? The elephant's going to stomp it and it's going to die. So dogs are programmed, things they don't see when they're young, to distrust. And what that means in the human world is if your dog does not see a lot of other dogs or a lot of other people or trains or cats or whatever, by the time they hit 16 weeks, they are genetically programmed to basically for a switch to turn off and say, don't trust that stuff. And it creates huge problems. And sometimes socializing goes well because just dumb luck. If you've got a busy life and you see dogs, you see people, that's great. Your dog meets them and everything's fine. But you get a dog over winter and you don't see those people, big problems. Or the pet peeve for me is when veterinarians tell people not to socialize their dog until they're 16 weeks because of getting all their vaccines. And we all know the issue, or I say we all, the 3 of us know the issue with that. Dogs have a critical socialization window that closes at 16 weeks old, and that's the time they get their last shots. So if you wait to socialize until you get your final shots for your puppy, there's a very good chance you're going to be calling us in the future because your dog bit someone because they didn't trust him or had fear issues. So I think that's an opening. I mean, I could monologue for 5 hours on that, but Nelson, what's running through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really big one. The what is normal and what isn't is something that's lost when a lot of people are talking about socializing, right? Because it could be anything. It could be a train. It could be different types of people. Obviously, that's a big one, or just people in general, right? How many times have you gone to a house call with a German Shepherd and like, oh man, he's met so many people when he was 16 weeks and then never again, and now my brother-in-law came over and got bit in the butt. So it's not just different kind of people, it's just also keeping up, right? Of hey, people are still awesome, don't kill everybody that comes in.
For sure. One thing that drives me nuts is when people say, well, I don't want to socialize them too much because I want them to be a good guard dog. And what I explain there is when you socialize, you teach them what's normal and what's not. So they start to realize people coming over and knocking on the door, and you say, hi, how are you? You let them through. You give them a hug. They realize what's normal human interaction. And they also start, they don't see the stuff that's not normal. If you have a guardian breed dog, they're going to understand what's not normal. And the best example I give to people is, if you've got a guardian breed dog, have you ever had something weird in your yard? Like for me, I had a tarp the other day that blew across the yard. And my dogs got up in the morning and they're like, grrr, staring out the window, growling at this tarp. Why? Because it was different, right? They're like, that's not supposed to be there. If you socialize your dog well and someone is peering through your window at midnight and that's not a thing they've ever experienced, they're going to freak out, right? They're still going to protect you. They're still going to go nuts. If someone kicks down your front door screaming, they're still going to freak out. So socializing doesn't teach them to be nice to everybody. It teaches them what's normal and what's not. I think that's a point a lot of people miss.
I think another one, there's also a really, really big factor of if my dog barks at everyone and everything, I stop trusting my dog. Like, he's going to start barking. Someone could potentially actually be there. And my first thought is a leaf blew by. It's no big deal. I don't actually have to be worried because owners are so conditioned to my dog barks at absolutely everything. And if you really did want a dog that was good at letting you know, hey, something's weird, something's amiss, you have to actually teach them to stop barking at all the normal stuff so that when they bark, it's significant to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll go on house calls a lot where I'll meet with the client and, the husband will say like, well, hey, I want this dog to protect my wife. I work a lot and she's home with the kids or something. And my first question is like, and go back to the aggressive German Shepherd, right? And my first question is, when she answers the door at noon and you're gone, where's the dog? And they're like, well, we have to put him up because he's aggressive. Like, yeah, so is he protecting her? No, he's like put up, right? So when you train this dog and he's socialized properly, he's not going crazy. First of all, he will go crazy if someone attacks your wife. If it was already in him, it's still there. And he's also a great deterrent when he's well enough trained and well enough socialized that she says, hey, get back, sit, stay, and puts him in a sit stay 3 feet behind her. If that person had bad intentions, they're thinking twice when the dog is there. And you can't do that with an unsocialized dog because it's lunging, right? And it's, going to be on a leash or put up somewhere.
And that's a big one, right? Like deterrent, and this isn't a dig at guard dogs by any means, but deterrent means that people know that it's there, right? And so if you can't walk your dog, if you can't do anything where other people see that you have this gorgeous shepherd, it's useless. It's useless to you.
Absolutely.
People are going to like, oh, that's that shepherd. He lives at that house. And like, that's a real thing. That's how deterrents work. And so, if you can't actually get out, it's halfway useless.
Yeah, whenever I have a client that's really worried about the protection aspect, I always tell them, like, listen, typically, criminals are lazy. They don't want to work. So if they walk up to a house and a dog's barking, they're going to move on. Like, so my 40-pound golden retriever is as good as your 90-pound German Shepherd in that regard. Like, they're just, I don't want to mess with it.
Okay, are we allowed to argue with the moderator a little bit, or is that
No,
not allowed?
absolutely not.
That's a part of the game. That's like bonus points.
If I was a criminal and I saw a golden, I'd be like, wow, that dog's going to welcome me to the house. This is going to be easy. I'm going to pet a dog while I steal stuff.
If you can't see the dog, just hearing. Just hear. I need to clarify. Just hearing. Yes. If they see it's a golden retriever, you might be screwed.
Then I would be wondering, like, do you leave fingerprints on dog fur? Like, could I pet this dog, or are they going to be dusting the dog later for prints and catch me that way? Is that a thing?
They're going to be like, you can't prove that I was there. Their fur is all over your hoodie right now, sir.
DNA test the dog hair.
So, backing up a bit to something that I think I have this conversation with clients a lot, the idea of when do you socialize and how important it is to do it before 16 weeks. So what happens is some vets will tell you, don't socialize till your dog is 16 weeks, right? And the idea is that's when they're fully protected from parvo, distemper, rabies, all these things. And if there wasn't a critical socialization period, well then, yeah, wait till 16 weeks. Why not? That's great, but that's not that's not the world we live in, right? That window is a real thing. So we have to make smart decisions. I counsel my clients every day on how do we make smart decisions. So it's not that we don't worry about distemper and parvo. I worry about it for sure. I would never take my young puppy at 10 weeks old to a dog park. And
Right.
I would, in behavior, I'd worry about a dog biting him as well. But I would not take him to the pet store and let him walk up and down the aisle. I'm cautious when I go to the vet's office. I don't let my puppy walk around, the whole foyer there and smell everything. I wouldn't take him downtown to a big city where 1,000 dogs have been and let him smell where every dog has peed. But that doesn't mean we can't walk in our neighborhood. And that's what really frustrates me when I have clients that have been told, like, don't walk him at all. Like, the odds of getting parvo and distemper in your neighborhood for the average neighborhood are remarkably slim. I mean, it could happen, but we make smart decisions. I won't let my puppy play with a dog who's just been at doggy daycare. Parvo and distemper in theory could be on the fur. It's a small chance, but it's more than I want to take. But my neighbor dog, who's met like 1 or 2 other dogs in the last month, and he's healthy, that's a risk I'm taking for sure. And I'm going to let my puppy say hi to him, because otherwise you end up with a dog who very likely is going to be fearful and aggressive with new dogs. And I honestly think, I see this with vets, I don't know how you two feel, the younger the vet, the more likely they are to say, don't socialize them until they get all their shots. The vets that are 40, 50, 60, 70 are like, yeah, you need to socialize your dog. I do think there's more aggressive dogs now than there used to be, and there's more anxiety in dogs. And this is one of the real reasons that you have these young vets right out of school that are crazy risk averse, and they haven't seen enough aggression cases and put it together. And they're like, just from a medical standpoint, you should wait.
Yeah, and I have seen something very similar. We have the vet that I go to is pretty old. It's an old practice, and so I like him a lot more than some of the other vets that I go to, like with clients and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, there's a loss of just let it happen and we'll find out what happens, right? When I talk to my vet, it's like, well, like, take him out, and if he gets sick, we'll take care of it. But again, if you're not making stupid decisions like taking him to a daycare or something like that, generally you're going to be okay. And then, like you said, I hear a lot of vets that are, they can't chew antlers before they're 5 years old, and they can't do this or they can't do that. There's a huge debate, of course, about neutering and whatnot. And like, I talked to my vet, and he's like, I don't know, man, this is how we do it. This is what we've been doing for years and years and years. And everybody seems to be pretty happy about it. So
yeah, so there's not a perfect answer here, but I always caution people, you need to look into this. You need to be socializing and doing it smart. And, as a company, we've had between 15 and 20,000 clients that we've worked with. A lot of those are older dogs that have come to us for aggression or other issues, but a lot are puppies. And I have never once heard of a client's dog getting parvo or distemper from normal socializing. Now, we have clients who have taken in a foster that had parvo or distemper, and we've had clients have issues with it, but it's never been, they're just like, they've got their normal healthy puppy that they've been doing their vaccine schedule on, and they were in the neighborhood socializing, and the dog got parvo distemper. Never seen it. And doesn't mean it can't ever happen, but I mean, you could get hit by a bus while you're out there too. So you have to determine, like, where do you draw the line?
the other one too is just, I don't know, comfortability, I guess. What I mean by that is, you get a lot of people. So like right now, it's freezing cold outside, and there's a crazy amount of snow. I live in Chicago, Chicagoland. But that's one of those things where, just like you said, if you get a puppy in the winter, socializing is almost dead. But listen, you're probably not going to get parvo at Barnes and Noble, and there's a nice comfy chair for you to say hi to people at. You can get pretty creative. You don't have to go to all of these dog places, because those dog places are probably where you're going to have problems, right? But I'm not one to stand out in the rain just to socialize my dog. I'd rather go to a store or Home Depot or something like that and walk around and talk to people there.
Well, I would say for time's sake, let's move on, and let's just throw out there, you could get the best bred dog from the best breeder, and you could have great intentions, and you don't socialize it, and you're probably going to have issues. So I'd say we move on, but that's a big issue for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Wait, am I the moderator now? Did that make me the moderator?
Are you trying to steal my job, Covey?
I kind of want it. It's a lot of power.
Well, too bad you don't have the list.
That's true.
So next up is handling exercises. I'll let Nelson start us off here.
Yeah, I mean, handling exercises is kind of a sleeper, right? It's one of those things where as a puppy, you don't ever see anything crazy happen, and then your dog is a year and a half old, and I never saw this coming. I walked past him and brushed up against his butt while he was eating accidentally, and he ripped into my leg. But it doesn't have to be that severe, of course, but to be honest with you, that's one that I see very often. But yeah, just, oh, we can't clip his nails. He'll bite for sure. Or, hey, he's got an ear infection. I don't know how we're going to do this because he's probably going to rip our ears off if we try to touch his, that kind of stuff. Handling is the cheapest way to prevent a lot of aggression by, just hanging out, watching an episode of TV and handling your dog at the same time. It's one of those,
yeah.
It's one of those bonker ones where like, oh, I don't have time. But like, have you sat down at all today? Because you can be petting your dog at the same time.
This is the easiest one to do too.
It is easy. So let's break that down just a hair. I don't think we need to spend a crazy amount of time on this one because once people understand, it makes a lot of sense. But
we'll have links in the description to some of our videos on some of these topics, like handling is one of them too.
Okay, so let's hit high level. So we're handling resources and we're handling their body. Those are the really important things. So Nelson mentioned nails, but I like to do with all of my clients when I'm working with puppies, we do full mock vet visits. So we're opening the eyes, opening the mouth, lifting the tail, doing all of that stuff. We want that to be normal, not scary, not strange, and then handling resources. Yeah, food, toys, bones, all of those things. And when you do this young, the dog is going to be good. But also, if they start to have an issue when they're 9 months old, you already have a baseline in your mind. Because a lot of clients don't know dog body language, and you've been clipping their nails forever, handling their bone forever, and all of a sudden at 6 months, you're like, why did his tail stop wagging when I petted him? And why is he looking up at me out of the corner of his eye? This feels weird. And just even flagging that and being able to call your trainer and be like, hey, this felt weird to me. I'm like, well, that is weird. We need to address that, right? If you don't have that baseline, you don't know. And a lot of dogs don't growl before they bite. A lot of them freeze and stare. So doing this when they're young is going to be likely to prevent it. Keeping it up long term is absolutely crucial to prevent, resource guarding and issues handling them. And it at least also lets you know long before the bites that you've got a problem coming if it is developing.
Yeah, and that's actually a really, really good point. That if you don't do it enough, you won't know what's normal and what isn't normal. We talked about it with socializing dogs, but for us too, right? I mean, that's one where how many times have you guys seen clients? Again, I never saw it coming or anything like that, and they've never realized that their dog froze, or they never realized what whale eye was. They never realized that any of that stuff was not normal, right? Because they didn't do it consistently.
Yeah. So last thing I think we should, mention on that, unless you have more, Nelson, is just don't stop. So many people, I work with a client and they're like, oh no, don't worry. I've done the handling exercises. My dog's good. And then we explain, your dog's 9 weeks old. Like, it's awesome that you've done this, right? So not diminishing that. That's awesome. But your dog's not good. So I'm glad that he's good right this moment, but he's 9 weeks old. Very few 9-week-old puppies show resource guarding. It happens, but it's uncommon. You start now, you have to keep it up lifelong, but at least work really hard through maturity, like up to a couple years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of puppies and resource guarding, I have a little video on that.
Oh my gosh.
Look at that vicious little guy.
Is this CGI? Look at those teeth.
Those teeth are crazy.
That guy is all of like 8 weeks old. Teeth barely coming in. There's nothing much. I came across that.
I'm just waiting to see what happens next.
It ends. It just ends.
So obviously that's extreme, right? And anyone would know, I would hope, that that's a problem. But very often you don't get that, right? You get like you're petting your dog and he's eating and he stops eating and he hunches and he tenses up a little bit and his head might go up and stare at you a little bit and there's no noise and there's no teeth and you're like, he just took a break while eating it, and then you walk off and you feel like everything's good. And then 6 months later, you end up with what we just saw in that video there.
What we just saw in that 8-week-old rot.
Yes.
And,
But that's another one though. So how would you feel? Because I've heard this before from clients where, oh, I just kept petting him and I just kept it going. There's a lot of people that would have kept petting that dog. I don't know, until they got bored or something like that, because he never actually lunged at them, right? He's just super pissy. There's don't do that. There's a lot of things that you can do to mitigate some of the stress that dog is probably under too.
And the odds of getting bit are pretty darn high.
Yeah, no
if you
question.
keep petting them. So there's always a chance you won't, but the odds are pretty darn high for sure.
Definitely. One little point to add to something you were saying, Covey. Yeah, it's great when you're 9 weeks old and you're not doing it, but I always tell my clients, like, listen, first year and a half of a dog's life, you're going through like the first 20 years of a human. We all know what happens to teenagers, right? Same kind of thing can happen with dogs. They start pushing, testing the boundaries a bit, and that's when those things can come out. So that's why you stay on top of it and keep doing it.
Yeah, if I have worries with a client, especially with a tougher breed, I create a schedule for them, and you're doing this daily for the first so many months, body and resources. Then you're going to 3 times a week, and then twice a week, and then once a week for the rest of the life. And obviously more is better, but Nelson, you said this earlier, like you have to sit at some point. So, and you're already petting your dog, so you can do the body then. And you're feeding your dog each day, presumably. So you're putting food in. It's not that hard to put the food in and scratch their head, take the bowl, tap them on the head again, put the bowl down, pat them on the butt, and walk off, and then walk back in again. You're already doing the effort of giving them food. So keeping this up is not that big of a challenge.
But that's why I call it the sleeper, right? Is because you're not going to see the problems until it's already, a year and a half. You're dealing with a dog that's 10 times bigger than when you met it and probably ready to show down.
All right, should we move on?
Yeah. All right, now we're into the unique ones. So we'll start with Covey. People get the wrong dog breed.
You're telling me Nelson didn't have this on his list?
He did not.
Okay, I was surprised we only had 2 in common. So I'm
I was
very
surprised
intrigued.
that we only had 2 in common too, but I was trying to go for ones that I didn't think you would say.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay.
A likely story.
Yeah. So, wrong dog breed, man. We could spend so much time on this. And there's so many thoughts. So first off, as we talk about breeds, we're not going to say that some of these breeds are bad. They're just different. And I'll open with, both of my dogs are rescues, and they are both a mix of breeds that I would tell people not to get for a first-time dog owner. So one is Australian cattle dog mixed with a Catahoula. The other one, the mom was a lab mix, the dad was Rot and Akita. So besides the lab mix part, every one of those other breeds I would tell first-time dog owners you should not get. And I think people often get dogs because they're cute, right? This one's cool looking. Or my neighbor's got one, it seems pretty good. Or I saw one in a movie, or I don't know, something. And they don't understand how different dog breeds are. I mean, they've been bred for a purpose to be very, very, very different. We talked about Goldens earlier. I call them the breed you can't mess up, right? Like Goldens, you do everything wrong. They're still probably going to be pretty good. And there's other breeds you do even a little bit wrong, and they're just not very forgiving. And, we could name some of them, but an Akita for sure, a Rottweiler, a Malinois, Dogos, Cane Corsos.
Sure. Mastiffs.
There's
most of the Mastiffs for sure.
Cane Corsos.
Yeah, sure. Yep. There's just so many out there, and they're not forgiving in that sense, and they need a good owner. And when I say good, I mean an experienced owner. And this is for a lot of reasons, but one analogy I give clients when they're asking me what breed they should get is okay, so you've got a son or daughter who's 16, and you're getting them a car. Are you going to get them a Dodge Viper? And they laugh and no. I'm like, why? It doesn't have, first of all, it's too much power. It doesn't have proper traction control. It doesn't have all of these things that make cars safer to drive and easier to drive, right? they're going to spin that thing out and they're going to hit a telephone pole at 100 miles an hour, right? It just, odds are it's going to go poorly with that Dodge Viper. They need to learn. I learned on a Ford Taurus that had so little power that it was hard to mess up, right? Like, you're not doing burnouts in a Taurus. You're not racing people. And you learn skills that way. That's how I believe dogs are. You need to learn on something easy. And you learn on a Golden or a Lab, and you make a few mistakes, you do this and that, it's pretty easy to fix. You learn on a Malinois, and you're probably going to have some major issues.
And a lawsuit.
I could go on forever. Did you say and a lawsuit?
And a lawsuit.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts, Nelson?
Yeah, and it's not just breed. The reason I use breed when I talk about this kind of stuff is because certain breeds have a higher propensity to have certain personality types. But it's personality types, right? I mean, really is what it comes down to. And there's some people like me that like a little bit more of a dominant personality because with training, they get to exactly where I want them to be. My golden retriever mix is a little soft for me, but that being said, everybody loves Griff because he's so easygoing for the masses, right? Generally, people are going to gravitate towards him because he just wants to sit next to you and be pet, and that's his whole day. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a personality more than anything. One of the things that I keep trying to tell people about is, I'll go to the breeder with you and I will pick out all the dogs that I think are going to work out well for you. And then you get to pick the cutest one from that group and I'll be totally happy, right? Don't grab the first dog that runs up to you because he picked you, because he probably picked you for a reason. And so there's a lot of different breeds. And I do think that a lot of it isn't just how cute they are, right? But I think a lot of it comes down to, I don't want a golden because those are too common. I want something cool. I want a Malamute or something crazy, right? That for a first time owner, like half the people in the neighborhood haven't heard of those dogs, and probably for a good reason. Think of Shibas. Shibas are adorable. Don't get me wrong, right? But everybody's like, I want a Shiba because nobody has them.
Those are some stubborn dogs.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up the point that every dog is different within a litter. And we've got some videos on that topic that maybe we could link to one on how to pick the right puppy. Because for sure, you get a litter of Goldens and you're going to have one that's easy, one then a lot in the middle, and one that's a little bit harder. And same with a litter of Rottweilers. There's going to be a very submissive pup in there that's going to be pretty easy to raise. And there's going to be some that aren't. So that matters. But on the flip side of that, breed matters, right? And we all know that. And sometimes when I'm explaining this to a client, I've had someone ask me, like, well, do you discriminate against breed? And I'm like, yeah, of course I do, because they're different, right? And we can go back to mine. So I love cattle dogs. I think they're just awesome. But if I'm walking down the street with my kids and I see a cattle dog walking to us, my first thought is not like, I like cattle dogs, I should let my kids go up and pet that dog. There's a decent chance that cattle dog's going to have aggression issues. Now, there's a chance he doesn't, but if I see a Golden, I'm discriminating less. I'm looking at their tail, I'm looking at a lot of things, right? Their mouth, all of that, but most likely it's going to be fine. But my other dog, Rot and Akita mix, I'm discriminating against both of those breeds because they've been bred to guard, and they're harder to raise, and people might not have socialized them properly. So if you are blind to breeds, you're a fool. You need to understand breeds are different, and there's no such thing as a bad breed or a good breed, but there are breeds that are more likely to bite you. And you could say it's not the dog's fault. Fine, whatever. Say it's the person's fault because they raised it wrong and they got the wrong breed. Either way, I don't want my kid getting bit in the face. So I absolutely discriminate based upon breed, and I encourage all of my clients to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it sounds mean when you use the word, discriminate against the breed, right? But it's making smart decisions and knowing some breeds are more likely to have been raised improperly and to bite.
Yeah. And also, different breeds will tell you, we'll tell trainers, right? What are the more common problem areas, right? What are the things that we need to focus on more because we have this breed instead of some of this stuff, right? If I get a hound dog, working on food and handling like 10 times a day just to make sure that I can take anything away from that dog.
Like when you walk into a client's house with a bloodhound and you're like, so I'm assuming he bit your other dog over food, right? I'm like, how did you know? Well, I've met a bloodhound before.
I've met one before.
Yeah. That's a phenomenal point, Nelson, for sure, is that knowing the breed, right? And knowing what they're more likely to do and not do, for sure. Mm-hmm. So one thing, I also kind of explain to people is that when you have someone who has a tough breed and they do well with it, they've learned along the way. They've learned a lot about dogs. And I don't know if they learned it on an easy breed or if they, like a lot of times we get people that have, let's say, an Akita, and they're like, I really want you to train it and we need to socialize it. And I say, have you had Akitas before? And they're like, yeah, I had one before and he was aggressive with new people. So now they've learned, okay, I need to work harder with this one to prevent that. But generally speaking, people with tougher breeds have learned to make smarter decisions with those breeds. And I think that's really important for people to understand. Like you get a golden and you have a kid's birthday party, people come and going, and you're not watching. Maybe you leave the front door open and like everyone comes in and all the kids are hugging the dog. If you have a Malinois or a Shepherd from a protection line, you probably don't do that, right? You probably have that dog somewhere where you're keeping an eye on it because you know the dog. It doesn't mean the dog is bad, but you're keeping a little bit of a closer eye. Or if you have a party with, 50 people over, most very experienced dog owners, at least in my opinion, put their dog up if they have 50 or 60 people over to the house. Doesn't mean the dog never comes out, but when they're doing something else, they're preparing food, they're dealing with people, if it's a bunch of new guests, they've, just learned from life experience, maybe let's put that dog up. And a lot of times new dog owners haven't learned that, and you do that with your whatever, Rot or Cane Corso at 10 months old, and he nails somebody in the face, and you're like, what happened? And you find out a strange guy had a few too many beers, tried to hug the dog or whatever, and you learn that the hard way. So I think a lot of times it's just people learn how to manage these dogs better.
That's actually a great point. And one of the kind of the inverse of that, right, is if you ended up with an awesome dog for your first dog, and then you get a puppy, that the experience still holds, right? Of like, this is different. I never worried about petting my other puppy. Maybe I should call somebody now before the dog is 6 years old. So, I mean, the experience is invaluable, and you don't have to have a bad experience to glean some insight. I mean, even great experiences will tell you that, hey, this is different than my last dog, and now we need to think about, different kind of training. That doesn't mean you should be comparing your dogs constantly, though.
How come? Because that's the first 10 minutes of many of your house calls?
Every house call. But my last dog, it was the sweetest dog. That's awesome. I wish I met that dog.
And very often it's sad, but it's like the last dog was an easier breed, and they've gone out and got this new breed that's really popular, and they're like, he's nothing like Ranger was. Like Ranger was a lab and you got a Shiba. Doesn't mean we can't train this dog, right? We can make him awesome, but he's a Shiba and he's never going to be as easy as that lab was for you.
Are you trying to tell me that my Shiba won't be a therapy dog?
Maybe. It might be.
Probably.
Yeah. And there are some cool Shibas out there. So for you Shiba owners that are about to drop comments saying how awful we are, there are some really fun Shibas out there, but it takes more luck and a lot of work to get it than some of your easy breeds. It doesn't really take luck. Like a golden, you just have to do nothing insane and your dog's going to make a good therapy dog. Some other breeds, you have to work really hard and have picked the right one from the litter. In a litter of goldens, most likely every dog would make a decent therapy dog.
Yeah.
Nelson's disagreeing.
I disagree.
Let's hear it.
This is a moderator moment right here, okay? Because let me tell you, there are a long list of Goldens that I've met that would be too spastic to make a good therapy dog. Maybe when they hit 8, right? But at a year and a half, 2 years old, and some of this, of course, is user error, right? You know, the owners just didn't have that in mind, and therefore that wasn't what they were training for. But I mean, think about how many Goldens that are 2 years old and you have to stop them from counter surfing. That part is really, really tough when it comes to that test, and only because of experience, right? They've gotten away with it a million times, and they're like, well, yeah, this guy's telling me no, but I know how delicious that cupcake is. And, like,
Yeah.
so there's a couple of things. Running away, you know, recall is tough for a golden that's already old. So I don't know. Especially the hunting lines and whatnot, you really get into. These are not therapy dogs.
They're
These
high
are,
drive.
yeah, high drive,
Hmm.
very annoying. If that's not what you're going for, you're gonna have a tough time with those dogs too.
My golden is high hunting pedigreed, and that I wasn't necessarily going for that, but when I got her, every golden breeder that I felt was decent was on a 2-year wait list, and I actually started searching hunting dogs and found one more readily. Uh, but yeah, it she can be a lot. She's not like what most people think of goldens.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
Well, let me rephrase my statement and see if you take umbrage with this one. If you have the average litter of Goldens, now there's obviously Goldens out there that are aggressive,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
But
There's
it's
always
very uncommon.
outliers.
If you take the average, yeah, you give me 20 litters of Goldens from a decent breeder, from 20 different breeders. I'd say out of those litters, the odds of one having a personality that can't be molded into a great therapy dog are about zero. So are some going to be wild and spastic? Absolutely, and harder to train. I think what people don't see sometimes or understand is that take a breed, and we don't even have to name one, but a very challenging, a breed who's more likely to distrust. There's going to be a dog in that litter, no matter how well you train it, is almost incapable of being a therapy dog. Not that we can't pass the test. I could take any dog in the world, give me time, I'll train it to pass a therapy test. That's easy. But can I make any dog in the world enjoy being hugged by a child, by a strange child? No. Now, I can take most of them, and I've had a lot of really aggressive dogs that we've gotten to the point where they start to enjoy new people and we trust them a lot. But you cannot take every dog in the world and get them. You can get them to not act out. It's very easy to get a dog to not lunge for a child in a skateboard. That's a breeze, right? But to get them to enjoy that child, a new child hugging them in the face, some dogs are never going to like that. And that's what I think some people don't realize. They're like, okay, as long as we train it, we're going to be good. Well, we can train it and we can make it not act out. We can make it not act like a psycho. We can make it listen to everything. Doorbell rings, you put him in his place or downstay, no problem. But there are some dogs who are never going to like being hugged by a stranger. And if you really want a dog who likes to be hugged by strangers, you need to choose a breed that is more likely to have that. So that's something I think is important for people to hear and think about. And I don't want a stranger hugging my dog. So that's not a thing when I'm thinking about a dog breed. Like, can every stranger bear hug my dog? That's not high on my list of qualities that my dog needs to have.
And that's fair. That's the other side of the coin, right? Listen, not everybody wants the easiest dog in the world either. I like more of a dominant type of dog. I'm very fond of, pits, dobes, and shepherds and stuff like that. Although shepherds whine too much, so maybe not shepherds. I like the personalities, but they whine a little too much for me. But again, that's not to say that would be me picking the right breed, right? Is to find a breed that probably has the personality that I would work well with.
Yeah, and it's knowing what you want, right? Yeah. And going out and getting that. And, both of you guys remember Kina. I had a dog in the past that was an American Bulldog from a protection breeder, and I didn't train her in protection, but she was incredibly drivey, and she had a very much a guardian instinct. And we had, and I had talked to the gas company about don't come in and read our meter, and without me, opening the gate. And I had a sign up that said, beware of dog, do not enter, had a lock on the gate, and had a guy jump the fence once to come read the meter. And I heard barking in the yard, and she had him cornered, and he was like this up against the fence, and she was standing there barking ferociously. And I went out and called her off, and then she was friendly with him afterwards. And I think they, put even more notes in their system after that. But that's something I want from a dog. I don't want a stranger going through my backyard. I think it's weird they put gas meters in the backyard, which is a whole separate subject. Those should be, I don't know anything about gas, but they should not be in the backyard where the meter reader has to go into your private space. Because to me, that's weird. I don't want a stranger walking across my deck out of nowhere. And I want my dog to react if they see that, because he could have been a rapist, right? And maybe he was. I don't know. But the dog stopped him. So to me, that's getting the right dog for you. But for a lot of people, if that dog wasn't well trained and well socialized, she would have ripped him up,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
But she was well trained and well socialized, and I didn't have a worry she was going to bite him. But he was terrified for sure.
I was so happy when I started with the company and I realized my gas meter was on the side of the house, and I purposely built my fence so that it did not include that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that is. We need to get with builders and explain to them how much it sucks that those are always in the backyard. That's just such a horrible place for it. It should be somewhere that's never going to be fenced in.
And you invite
All
a lot
right.
of trouble, right? I mean, like you're not just talking about do you have a protective dog? I mean, you invite a ton of trouble of are these people fresh out of high school and they left the gates open and all those dogs got out, or
Yeah.
hey, is this dog terrified of people, under socialized, right? And we're not worried about that dog biting somebody, but it snuck right out because some stranger came into. I mean, you're inviting a lot of problems by making those guys go into a backyard.
For sure. And mine was not protection trained, so she'd never learned how to bite. A lot of dogs that are protection trained would have been on that person.
Oh,
and they
no
would have had a
question.
hold on the arm or the leg, and without a sleeve or a suit on, that person would be going to the hospital for sure. So,
Yeah.
I don't envy that job.
Keena had gotten a hold of somebody, that'd have been bad.
And there's so many breeds out there, right? That if they're protection trained, in theory they might not bite and they might just guard. But if they've been trained to bite, and they've got it in them, there's a good chance they're biting there.
No question.
Alrighty. So, Nelson, you had not countering negative experiences.
Oh,
So that was a good one,
This is
right?
good. I like this, yeah.
So what I have to explain to people all the time is if you did have a puppy, and let's not go crazy, right? Like a 6-month-old dog, and you went to your friend's house because they have a dog that's nice, but that dog is 8, and therefore it does not like your 6-month-old puppy, annoying it, and it nips your puppy. That day, I am meeting 3 other dogs. That day, I am calling everybody and like, hey man, I'm coming over. I need my dog to meet your dog. All of these things. If I can replicate the breed, I certainly will do so. That kind of stuff. Holly had that happen with Annie. There was a husky that snapped at him, and then she went out to go find a bunch of huskies and stuff to socialize them with, because if it's a one-off situation, that's what can make a prejudice or a traumatic experience of like, man, all huskies suck, because the one time I met a husky, it bit me in the face, and so they're the ones that bite in the face, that kind of stuff. But it could be anything. It could be a tall guy. It could be take something in the wind, like that tarp that wraps a dog or something like that, and they're like, all tarps suck. I hate them all. A more common one is garbage cans, right? You're on a walk and the wind blows and a flap flies backwards, and they're like, I had no idea that thing makes that noise. And think about how many times you go for a walk and it's not garbage day, right? Next garbage day, that dog is like, listen, all of these things are death traps. I need to be on high alert. So anytime that you do have a bad experience, instantly start going for more experiences with the same thing, just to counteract whatever negative, connotations might be there now. Because a lot of the times I'll go to a client's house and I'll throw out 25% of all the house calls start off with, well, we were at a daycare, or we were at a dog park and there was a fight, and now I can't walk down my neighborhood because he barks and charges at every single dog. Whatever the case may be. Those are very bad situations that really, really suck. Don't go to a dog park. But nevertheless, there was a lot that we should have done much sooner just to prevent this kind of stuff from happening.
Yeah, I like this point. I wish this was on my list. Maybe we can edit this and say this is one of my points.
Nah.
Being that Nelson's the editor, I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh, dang it, yeah.
I win.
So I love this point, and now I think it's worth talking about. So closure, right? That's what I always explain to clients. Like, we need closure on that situation.
Yeah,
because this
closure,
also
I like
happens
that.
if you have 2 dogs that fight in the household, right? If we don't get closure soon, the problem's going to grow. But it doesn't always, closure's not always easy. And for people watching this, I hesitate. Like, I don't think people need to go find a trainer for every little issue, right? Some things you can do on your own for sure. But closure can be hard and you have to do it right. So it depends what your dog is like, right? So if he gets bit by a husky and you take him up to meet another husky and your puppy seems happy, well, then you're good on your own. That's fine, right? Go meet more huskies and the problem's going to go away. But what do you do if you go to meet that husky and your dog's freaking out and he pees as the dog's smelling him and now he's growling at the dog? You've got to get some closure and do it properly. And, I went through this with my cattle dog mix Dash. When I got him, he's a rescue. He was super dog aggressive. And I would say more reactive, but any dog that came near, showing his teeth, snarling, barking, lunging. He was young, like 12 weeks or something like that.
I would have never guessed that.
A cattle dog, that's bad for dogs, yeah. And, I had to work hard. It wasn't just like, oh, okay, I'll go meet some more dogs and now it'll be fixed, right? I had to work really hard on that, but I committed to it for months, and now he's insanely dog friendly. Like, dog fight happens and he's like, has no interest in going over there. He's probably the best cattle dog I've seen in regards to dogs, but I went nuts on my training. I mean, it was like all we did was dog intros for months on end, and it paid off. But my point is, it's hard. I didn't just like take him up to a dog and like, oh, now he likes this dog, right? We did a lot of slow intros, and I'd go places where dogs are behind fences and I'd hang out with him, and we'd just hang out for a while. We'd walk, we'd train, we'd do some stuff, and it might take 5 minutes until he was comfortable. Then we'd go up and let him smell that dog. And sometimes you're going to need a trainer's help, or you're going to have to watch a lot of videos to get that right closure. Because if you throw your puppy into a scary situation and he's continuing to be scared, you're going to make it worse, not better. So you need a plan for this closure.
Yeah, and talking to trainers is such a big help, because you can... A good trainer could save you hours and hours and hours of your life, because you might be doing hours and hours and hours of something stupid, right? Where there's a ton of stuff that you can do, like hang out at a dog park and just never go in is an easy one that anybody could do, so long as someone brought that idea up to you, right? Because most people would say, hey, I need to go to a dog park, but I need to go inside to meet those dogs, and that could have been a nightmare. That would have done literally the opposite of what you wanted it to do. And so talking to a trainer is very, very beneficial when it comes to that kind of stuff, because troubleshooting is something that's only possible when you've seen the problem before. And most clients, right? I mean, most owners don't. Or if they do, they stop and then never fix the problem.
Identify and
that's
avoid.
a good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. And you had good ones on your list right there. I mean, like what we did with our dog was we went to parks and places where dogs are behind fences, hung out, didn't even go in the dog park, and hung out and trained until he was calm. Training is big, right? We didn't just hang out and let him growl. We healed, we sat, stay, come, do positive, fun things there, and then let him smell. I would go to places like Petco or PetSmart and sit or stand in front of them and not even let them say hi to dogs. When people would say, can you say hi? I'd say, no, we're in training. Let them walk by. So he could start to realize not every dog's going to come over and stand over him. There's a lot of little things you can do. And then I also chose the right dogs to introduce him to. That's really important. And that's something a trainer would tell you. You see a dog that looks over the top, that's pulling really hard, even if they're potentially friendly, probably not the dog to let your scared puppy say hi to. Look for that 8-year-old dog who's like, meh, I could take you or leave you. That's the one you want. So good point, Nelson, for sure. If things are going poorly, a trainer can save you a crazy amount of time.
Can you, and super, super quick, I don't want to drown this one out, right? But can you just go over a tiny bit of the fact that I did not let my dog meet other dogs was better for it than to go for the gold and have him meet every single dog. I run into that with clients all the time, where I'm like, hey man, if all of this goes well, if we have the perfect house call today, all three of us are going to be bored, right? I'm going to be bored, you're going to be bored, this dog is going to be bored. If everything goes our way, this is going to be the most boring house call. But that's tough, right? You run into everybody because they want to see a dog fight, and then they want to see the dog calm down afterwards. And like, if that happens, yeah, I'll calm the dog down, but it would have been 10 times better if we never got there.
That's one of the top things I always
Yeah.
say in my appointments. I'll go, I'm bored now. And I'll be like, that's a good thing. It's like, wait, let's do something different.
Yeah. I use a similar, I tell them good dog training should be kind of boring when you're working on those things, right? Come should not be boring. Teaching
Yeah,
come should be
fair.
a lot, exciting, right? But for, aggression and fear issues, we're not trying to push them over threshold, have them freak out beyond belief, and then magically the trainer steps in and calms them down. The goal is we edge them closer to the threshold. They never cross over to the other side. They never freak out. And each time we do it, we're able to get more. But, to the question you posed, Nelson, about when do you let them say hi to dogs, I think there's two things that are very different that are important there. One is, like your average golden, I don't think they should say hi to every dog when you're training because then they become conditioned to that.
Yeah.
So, they're conditioned to pull to every dog. So I would do a lot of practicing. You're not always going to let them say hi to a dog. And if their leash pops off, you want them well enough trained that they don't run up to a strange dog to say hi. A lot of Goldens and super friendly dogs get hurt that way. And then with my dog being fearful, it would have been a setback. So he was, barking and growling. If I'd let a nice Golden come over and stand on top of him and say hi, and he snipped or snapped or growled or whatever, even if no one got hurt, that's a setback. That's not like, oh, good, he was exposed, he'll get better. Like, no, he would have gotten worse, right? So I was looking for no growling, definitely no showing teeth, no lunging, even if no one got hurt, even through a fence. And then we slowly built up to the point where he was playing with dogs. And then now, because of the work, he's able to play with all dogs and really enjoys dogs. But it took a lot of work, and we limited bad experiences to almost zero. And there were some dogs we just wouldn't say hi to because they were too wild. It wasn't worth it. Is that kind of what you were looking for, Nelson, and what you're thinking about?
Yeah, for sure. Right. Again, the big point being that it would have been a setback. So yeah, that was right on the money.
Alrighty, so Matt's next one is people don't know how to read dog body language.
This wasn't on Nelson's list?
No,
My gosh, I cannot wait to hear the rest of your list.
it's going to be fascinating, just so you know.
So I don't know how long, this isn't meant to be a talk on, teaching people to read dog body language, right? But a lot of people don't know dog body language, right? And they say things like, I don't understand why there was a fight, his tail was wagging, right? And as a trainer, I have so many things to say to that, right? Dogs wag their tails for so many reasons. First off, wagging means excitement, not happy. So it can be nervous excitement. It can be a very dominant, edgy excitement. It can be many things. If you've got a dog who enjoys to fight with dogs that you just rescued that's been in a lot of fights, he might enjoy fighting and he could be wagging his tail. He might be happy. He might be happy
He
because
is
he's
happy.
going to attack. Right. He might be happy like there's a dog I can attack. So wagging tail on its own is meaningless. How is it wagging? Is it up? Is it down? Is it in between? And overall, and you guys know this, I always talk about tight versus loose body language. If the body language is loose, everything's probably good. And loose meaning he's wagging his tail and his whole butt's moving, as opposed to like tick tock, flicking back and forth. That's a warning sign. And people don't know those things. And now we're talking about like your dog meeting someone new, but you used the word whale eye earlier, Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these things that if you don't know them and you don't see the dog sign, you let something bad happen. Now your dog has become labeled aggressive because of what happened. It could have been prevented, months before, or you could have made a smart decision in that moment and your dog would have had a good learning experience versus a really bad situation. So a lot of mistakes happen here from good, well-intentioned people because they don't know how to read body language.
Yeah, when I go to schools, I'll tell all the kids, was the tail sweeping the floor or was it brushing the clouds away, right? And get a good idea of, is the dog's tail down or is the dog's tail up, right? So if the dog's tail is sweeping the floor, we get to say hi.
Okay. Yeah. It's just people need to learn these things. And sometimes people tell me like, well, but I don't know how to read dog body language. And I'll explain to them, you actually do if you think about it. Put some time, a lot of times people just don't even think about it. But, the studies that show black dogs are way less likely to be adopted from shelters. It's not because they're black and another dog is, whatever, red or this or that. It's because the eyebrows are also black. most likely, and you cannot read their facial expression. And people don't know they can read dogs' facial expressions. And there's been a lot of tests done that are fascinating where they'll show a picture of a dog and they're like, is this dog happy or mad? And not extreme,
Right,
not showing
yep.
teeth or whatever, but they'll have their commissures, the back of their mouth kind of pushed forward and their eyes are squinting and someone's like, that he looks mad. And they show them another one. They're like, that dog looks happy because the eyes are up a little bit. And people actually can read dogs' faces, but they just don't try to. With a black dog, it's subconscious. They don't know why they don't like that dog or don't trust it. It's because they can't read the eyebrows and they're like, I don't know what this dog is thinking. And then they see a lighter colored dog with, the eyebrows that stand out and they can see the eyes and everything and they're more comfortable with it. So, trust me, if you look at dogs, you can read dog body language better than you think. There's still probably more for you to learn unless you're a dog expert. But, humans, we already have such a bond with dogs. We can read their body language better than we think we can.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Not knowing body language, because not knowing body language goes both ways. What I mean by that is, we can prevent a lot of kids from getting bit by going up to dogs that, like you shouldn't be going up to. But also, what I tell people all the time is when people are out in public with their dog and they ask, or you ask, hey, can I pet your dog, or, anything like that, what they're thinking about is them on the couch. I'm like, well, yeah, I pet my dog every day. We sit on the couch and we're hanging out. We're happy. But if they were to actually look at their dog, clearly tell that dog's not comfortable. So oftentimes I feel like kids get bit a lot because of the owner of the dog, not just, the parents of the kid, right? Or they're like, yeah, my dog is super friendly. And then like ripped her face off. I have never seen that before. But the body language probably could have told you a different story.
With my kids, I've got 3 kids. I know you guys know that, but I'm saying that for the audience sake. A couple things. One is I discriminate based upon breed. So my kids don't go up and pet a new Akita. They just don't. And I like Akitas, for you Akita breeders or owners watching. I don't hate the breed. And there's many others I just don't let them go up and pet. It's not worth the risk. It's just not. I also don't leave them with strange men. I don't hate men. I don't hate strange men. I'm not taking the chance with my children being with a stranger that I don't know. It's not worth the risk to me. So, sometimes when it's like, when you're talking about dogs, people are like, how could you think that of a certain dog breed? Like, I take every step I can to protect my family. So I'm not going to let them say hi to some dog, some tougher breeds unless I know the dog in particular. My kids also have been taught from a young age how to look at dog body language, right? And they're looking at the tail. And if they see a tail up on a breed that generally doesn't have a tail up, they know that's a big red flag. So what I taught them when they were young is if a dog has pointy ears, there's a good chance he has a pointy tail, right? The tail is up, the ears are up. If you see a dog who does not have pointy ears and his tail's up, that is a big red flag. And on the, also if you see a dog that has natural pointy ears and tail up, that's a red flag too. Is there any breed that has a pointy ears and a tail up that is an easy breed? I don't think there is.
I can't think of one.
I have to interject a story real quick. I remember when it was within the first few months I was with Suburban K9 and I went over to your house, Matt, and your oldest came out to me and said, Mr. Alex, do you know if you see a dog with a purple tongue, you should never pet it? I said, yeah. I think
That's
your
an
dad
awesome
told me that.
Yeah. So for everyone watching, that's, mainly a Chow reference there. Sharpea too, I guess. And, some of them are good, but a lot are not. And once again, it's, my kids have also been taught if you see a man driving a panel van, you don't go near them. Not every man driving a panel van is, and Nelson, you had one for years.
Yep,
So yeah, you were cool. You were on the list.
I was going to make the joke of like, that's why they wouldn't say hi to me.
We had a list of men with panel vans they could say hi to. But no, I mean, that's, and that's a real conversation we've had. You see a guy driving a van that's like, hey, come over here. Don't worry about being rude. You get away from him right away. I don't care if he's the nicest guy ever. We're not taking that chance. And with some dog breeds that are more likely to be aggressive, why take the chance? For sure. So educate your kids. Absolutely. And educate yourself first and then your kids after. It's really, really important. You know how to read dog body language. You're going to have so many less issues.
Man, don't worry about being rude. That should be a point all on its own, right? You know, and again, that goes both ways. You don't feel bad about being rude, but also don't take offense to someone who does not instantly trust your dog. You know, when I was walking around with Bryn and someone didn't want to say hi, to be honest with you, I would just kind of chalk it up to like, oh, they didn't want to say hi to me. Not that they didn't want to say hi to Bryn. She is adorable. But, you know, again, that's not one of those things that I'm going to take offense to. Because if I didn't know someone and they had, you know, a black pit, I'm probably not saying hi. Right? Like, that's not a big thing. But, you know, don't be afraid of being rude is going to keep you much more safe for everything, right? I mean, there really isn't a situation where that's not a good rule.
Do you guys have
Yep.
any idea the number of times you've been out training a dog and you've seen somebody about to walk up and pet the dog you're training and you've cut right in front of them and said, "I'm sorry, I'm training," and turned around and walked away? Thousands.
Well, actually, a lot of the times I see him coming, right? And so I just turn around already.
Oh, that is,
Yeah.
I'll say it like you see them, they see the dog and then the eyes get big and then they start beelining. "I'm sorry, I'm training." Boop, gone.
And to expand, you know, for everyone watching on what Alex said right there, if we've got an 8-week-old puppy we're socializing,
Yes.
we're looking for
Yes,
those people,
absolutely.
right? We're out,
Absolutely.
like, we want people to
This
say
is with-
hi.
yeah.
And he's referencing, yeah, you've got a dog you're socializing that's aggressive and he's a year and a half old and you're trying to fix it. We do not want strange people coming up that we have to do intros carefully. So there's times we want those strangers and there's times where we have to be like, hey, back off. And we try to politely tell them, you cannot say hi to this dog right now, unless you've got time to work with me and do it properly.
And if I like it, that's the they're just too. I don't have time. Like, nope. And I turn around and walk away. And if I turn back and they're there, I'll explain more. Like, we're unsure of new people. Like, I didn't want anything bad to happen. Like, and then those.
But
people
let's go crazy. I mean, even with puppies, right? A lot of the times I'll tell people listen, you probably don't want your super excitable puppy to meet a super excitable person either, because they're probably going to encourage a lot of bad behavior, right? But you had said it earlier. Listen, you can't let your golden retriever meet every single dog. It's going to teach them to pull towards every single dog. But that goes for people too. Even if I have a puppy, if I'm at Home Depot or something like that, which is typically where it happens, I'll just tell people like, hey, I'm just going to train for a little bit first. And then on my way out, if I see you, I'll definitely let you say hi. Most people aren't waiting for me, right? But that's a big one. I don't want my dogs, my training dogs or my own personal dogs, to say hi to everybody. I want them to be cool and confident around every single person. And that does not mean over the moon excited.
No question. And it goes back to you making smarter decisions based upon your dog history.
Yeah.
Right? And what's hard is people, you know, you hear, like we just started by saying, socialize your dog. That's the number one thing. And let them say hi to people. Now here we are talking about don't let them say hi to everybody. And it's understanding why, right? And doing it in the right manner and understanding what's your end goal with this dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to, you know, a trainer can save you hours and hours and hours of your life, you know, just because they can game plan this stuff with you, as opposed to go meet everybody, you know, before your dog is 6 months. What do they say? That your dog needs to meet like 100 people, you know, something like that. But, you know, again, you can add to a lot of anxiety and a lot of craziness out of your dog by trying to achieve those goals too, if you don't do it right.
So, you know, staying on this subject for a minute, just about body language, another thing is teaching your children and yourself as well how to meet dogs properly, not just how to read them, but how to make smart decisions when you meet a dog. So what I teach my kids and any of my clients' kids and really anyone I'm talking to, or if I go to a school, same thing. My rules are, first off, never, ever, ever go to a dog to pet it. And when you first say that, they're like, what? Then how would you pet it? I'm like, call the dog to you. That can prevent so many issues. If the dog is scared, he's probably not going to come to you, right? And you say, come on, buddy, and he doesn't come, well, that's a pretty clear indication he doesn't want pets. So never, ever go, and I should say never, ever. This is a dog you don't know. A dog in your own house or your family or friend's dog, different rules. But another one is never, ever pet a dog that's laying down. So my kids have been taught, you know, don't ever go sit next to a strange dog and go to pet it. You want to pet it, call it to you. Make it get up and come to you. If it's not going to do that, then don't pet it. And then, of course, do not pet a dog when they have any sort of resource. Food, bones, toys. I don't care if your friend's dog is super sweet and it loves everybody and you met him at the door and he licked your face and he was nice. When he's chewing a bone or eating his food, do not pet them. And hand never goes out like this, right? It's never reaching out to the dog. You're calling the dog to come to you. You do those simple things and, don't make a lot of eye contact. The three of us, we go into clients' houses and they always say, I don't know why my dog is so much better with you. He must, he knows you're a trainer. It's your energy. I'm like, well, that stokes my ego a little bit, right? I've got this really cool energy. But no, it's like I'm not looking at the dog and I'm not talking to him, but I'm not standing really still and scared. I'm being casual. I act like there is no dog. I don't stand weird. I don't, freeze, but I just don't look at him. I chat with you. I act casual. The dog eventually wants to become my buddy. That's why, right? That's what you need to channel every time you meet a new dog.
Funny story about that. So every time that
let's hear it.
Not every time. I shouldn't be that crazy, but it's often enough that I go to someone's house and they're like, I can't believe how my dog is responding to you. Normally they'd be so much more crazy, more excited, more pissy, whatever it is. Are you the dog whisperer's son? And I'm, no, sorry, no relation. It's just a common skin tone. Sorry.
I resent. That's racist, actually.
I tan where he tans. Sorry.
But yeah, it happens all the time, right? And the way you act matters, and it affects the dog's behavior. So it can make a big difference that way.
Absolutely.
Well, we got a couple dog body language videos I have for us to watch here. So this first one, we got a trainer working with an aggressive German Shepherd.
Okay, I like that. I would want that leash as soon as possible.
That probably would have been the smarter move, is just to have her slip it on.
For sure.
Then you get that.
So not to knock Tom, but I see a few things that it could prevented this pretty easily, I would think. And what I would say is everybody makes mistakes, right? You get into something, you're like, if I had started a little bit differently, it would have been better. So I think we should break that down, but I want to make it clear that at least my breakdown is not criticizing Tom or say he did a terrible job. Because I know I've done things before, right?
We've all made mistakes in the heat of the moment.
Right, you're like...
Yeah, definitely.
And hindsight's 20/20, right? You look at it and you're like, wow, now that we know what that dog is really like, we should have done it differently.
Mm-hmm. How many times have you guys done the corner trick when you're getting a dog out of a crate and really messed it up? I've done that quite a few times.
You want to elaborate?
So you put the crate towards a corner, right? And that way there's enough room for the dog to start to get out, but can't immediately turn around on you. And so you have a slip lead and you're catching the dog as they go through to come out. You catch the dog right then and there. And the first couple of times that I've tried this, it went horribly wrong. Do you remember that dog? I want to say his name was Achilles. Like most dogs, right?
Oh, like an Anatolian mix or something?
Yeah, it was like some
brown
kind of
with white and...
like the largest cattle mix I've ever seen in my life. And I tried it on him, and what he ended up doing was just shooting that crate backwards and dodged the loop. And so now me and him are just in a standoff, and I was like, there was probably 10 different ways I could have done this and never gotten into this situation right here.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing, right? Hindsight's 20/20. It seemed like a good idea at the time, and then you get halfway there and like it wasn't a good idea.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you don't know how bad the dog is until you get into it, right? So I bet if Tom watched that video, he'd be like, well, I would have done it this way, right? I'd done something different. because sometimes dogs are way better than you expect. Someone tells you things and you're like, okay, and you work with the dog, you realize he's way better. And other times it's 1,000 times worse. You either they don't know, or they misled you on the dog, or you push back a little bit and the dog goes crazy, and because no one's ever pushed back some. But what I would have done there, we could all see as Tom was walking up, the dog was, as tense as could possibly be. He resented him approaching. He did not like it whatsoever. When I'm taking a dog like that from the client, we're walking. So, client, heel your dog, walk. I'm going to be next to you on the other side from the dog. And then I'm going to reach probably either in front or behind you. And I'm going to explain what I'm doing. And I'm going to eventually take that leash. And you're already going to know. And when I say stop, you stop walking. And I keep walking with the dog. And it goes 1,000 times better than that. You can get almost any dog away from their owner pretty easily. And once they're heeling with you, they're way less likely to attack. You stop and have them sit. Different story, right? Now they're motionless. Now their energy's on you. But I, definitely would have handled that differently in that moment. But I've been in that position where you go to take a hand off from the leash and the dog freaks out. And you're like, well, I didn't expect him to be this bad. Okay, now let's figure out, what do we do here?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the proof, of this is probably worse than he thought it was going to be is when he asked her to do the slip lead and the dog turned on her. And it was like, oh, this is worse than I was initially expecting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw a lot of tense body language there, and we saw once your dog crosses threshold, it's hard to get them back. Because, and I'm glad that you just made that point, the odds of that dog acting like that to that owner before Tom walked up are probably very, very slim, because he wasn't over threshold then. So there's a good chance, I haven't seen the rest of that video, maybe I'm wrong, but there's a good chance before that happened that she's patting the dog on the head and everything's fine. But once he crosses over threshold, it's really hard to get him back because he's.
So I watched the whole video. This is one of those dogs who has the things. As soon as you do something it doesn't like, it's on. So earlier in the video, it's fine, but she actually has a little trouble with the muzzle at one point because it doesn't like the muzzle. But yeah, gotcha. It's one of those.
Okay, so once he gets frustrated, really hard to get him back.
Yep.
Yeah. And there is a time where, and this is hard for a trainer, there is a time where you need to slow down. And you're like, you know what? He got over threshold. We could power through right now. But I think if we take a 10-minute chill out break and you walk him and you breathe and I breathe and the dog breathes, we all relax and then we go back to it, it's going to be a lot better. Easier said than done. In the heat of the moment, when the dog is lunging at the client and lunging at you and you want to keep everyone safe, as a trainer, sometimes you're like, I need to power through on this. And there's times that you make the wrong call and you should be taking that breather.
So for you guys, the client being there, does that make it more tough or less tough to take those breathers?
It's so dependent on the situation.
I'll give you that. Yeah. I mean, it certainly is, but I'll tell you.
I've got my answer.
For me, it's tougher with the client there.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's
100%.
tough to explain that, hey, I get that we're just sitting here for 10 minutes, but this dog really needed this.
I'm thinking of the clients that want to take the break. They're like, can we take it? Like, okay.
Yeah. That's fair, because that happens too.
Yeah.
Right. My big thing is always like, listen, I know we have an hour, but it's worth taking this 10-minute break.
Oh.
But sometimes it's tough justifying that. If they've never seen their dog act like that, it can go either way. Mm-hmm. I see a lot of clients, like you're saying, Alex, where they're like, can we just stop? Can we just pause? And sometimes I'm like, actually, no, right? The dog isn't tired or super frustrated. It's just never been told no before.
Yeah.
But then a lot of the other times I'm like, can we stop? Are you going to be upset if we take a small break?
Yeah.
I'm with you for sure, Nelson. And I'm eager, right? I want to help people and I want them, it sounds silly, but I want them to like me, right? And I want them to like the training. I want them to say, wow, that's a good value. He knows a lot about dogs and he helped me a lot. And you have to balance that between also telling them what they need to hear, clients, as opposed to what they want to hear. And so I always explain to people, my job is not to make you like me. Now, I hope you like me. I really, really do. Try. But my job is to help, my job is to help you and your dog live the best life together. And almost always those dovetail together. And you're going to like everything I say. We're always going to be good friends and we're fixing the dog. but there's times where I'm going to tell you the hard thing you don't want to hear, whether it's you need to do homework, and if you don't, everything's going to be bad, here's why, or your dog is a danger. If you don't fix this, he's going to hurt someone and get euthanized. And so I like to have that conversation with clients of us being friends is secondary. Me making the progress you need for you and your dog to have the best life together is primary. But it still is hard when you're like, let's take a break. Where I'm like, do they think I'm just lazy? Or
Right.
like, do they think I'm,
Exactly.
I'm scared of the dog right now or whatever? So I'm with you. It's harder to take that break versus two trainers. We'd get lunch, right? And
Yeah.
we'd hang out and let the dog chill and let the dog realize like, okay, they're not scared of me, but they're also not coming to get me right now. You can achieve a lot that way.
Definitely. All right. Got another one here. We're not watching these whole videos. Sorry, Tom.
Oh,
Yeah, no
another
worries.
video.
I just wanted to
Okay.
pick out a couple body language things.
Tense.
That was, and I was like, oh, and then it happened, and then when you rewatch it, he saw the same thing. You can see him seeing it at the exact same time we did.
Isn't he the one that said tense, or
Yeah.
was that one of
Oh,
yours?
that was
No, that was me.
Oh, okay.
yeah. Watch, see him get the he
There.
got the leash ready. He was ready. He saw
Yeah.
it.
That freeze.
Yeah,
The tail
Yeah.
stopped.
Yep.
Yeah.
Completely
that
froze.
the freezing up.
And look at him.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, look at his tail as you were just playing the clip still. His tail's wagging, but he's not happy.
Yeah, and you basically said this in very long form, but we need to dispel the myth. A dog with its tail up and wagging does not always mean it's a nice, happy dog. Doesn't.
He brought out the sultry voice.
I
just
did,
to make
just
that
to
point.
really-
That's how serious it is.
We better clip this one.
That's important.
But yes, the majority of the time, that's true, and that's why the myth exists, but it is not always true.
Okay, so I think we could, anyone watching, you could see him freeze, right? And the freeze is bad. I always tell people, if you know how to read dog body language, you've got a quarter to a half second. So it's not much, but it's better than zero. It's better than you're reacting when he's lunging. But that quarter to half second, it's fast. And that's why I like to hold the leash, because it is not enough time for me to make a word that makes sense for you to process and then you to do something. It has to be like that. And that first time we watched it, when I said tense and then boom,
Yep.
right there, that's how much time we have.
Yep.
Even if you're an expert at dog body language, it's really, really quick.
It is.
And that's actually a fun game right there, right? So for all of the listeners, go back and watch that clip. I'm sure we'll probably put it in a link or something. But, go from when you see the dog get tense yourself to when the dog explodes. I mean, it's not a lot of time.
Nope.
One thing I like to talk to people about with muzzles is the advantage of a muzzle is it buys you time. When you don't have a muzzle on, what I always explain is we have to be risk averse. I'm not going to let your dog attack another dog, right? So you have a half second, quarter second. It's not much time. Nobody is going to be right every time. And if I'm going to make a mistake, I want to be too cautious versus not cautious enough. And now your dog is latched onto that other dog's throat and we're trying to pry him off, right? What that means is there's times you're going to jump the gun, where the dog goes to go to a play bow, but you've got a quarter second and you see him go down and you're like, whoa, and you pull them back and you're like, oh, okay, I pulled him back. That was actually a play bow. I think that was going to be fine, but I had to react, right? And I think we've all been there. The muzzle allows you to give a little more freedom. Now, not a ton. You're not going to let him like leap on the other dog and go crazy, but it allows you, if you're like 80%, you're not exactly sure when you see something happen, you can let it play out a little bit longer. To me, that's the advantage of the muzzle. And without going back into dog body language too much, everything dogs do before they attack, they also do in play. Every single thing. Freezing, you have two dogs that are friends, they're running, and all of a sudden they're like this, and they're staring at each other, and then boom, they charge each other and growl and hit each other in the air and play. They do that all the time. And they also do that before they attack a new dog. They freeze, they stare, and then they attack.
That's funny because I like to tell people, like, your dog will look the same when it's going to bite you and when you're playing fetch, right? So, like, it will be the same look.
Yeah. And you have to read the context, right? And know. And I guess there's some things they always do in play. So a play bow, there's no such thing as a bad play bow. If your dog goes down into a classic play bow, they never do that for a bad reason.
Yeah.
But the things they do, not everything they do in play do they do in a fight. Everything they do in a fight, they do in play. It's a kind of a one-way street there. But some dogs show their teeth when they're excited and they're, smiling and they're very happy. Some dogs put their hackles up because that just means they're aroused and excited, as it doesn't mean they're aggressive. Obviously, growl, freeze, all of those things. Okay.
All right, moderator, what do you have next?
Moderator, I'm gonna get used to my newfound sense of power.
He's gonna get new business cards.
That's right. Spoiling dogs, Nelson has as his next on the list.
Spoiling dogs absolutely will. I shouldn't say it's 100%, but it will absolutely increase the chances of your dog being aggressive. And one of the big reasons is because you're not teaching them. Essentially, what you're teaching them is that they get everything that they want. And if it comes to a socializing instance, right, just like everything else that we've talked about so far, if I always get everything that I want, the second that I can't is a weird situation, I get to act weird to handle a weird situation, right? But more importantly, and I'm going to shoot myself in the foot because this was one of my other ones, but, if you don't teach those dogs how to handle pressure, like being told no or being pulled off of something or being, socially pushed back, or even there was a client that came over to our house, wanted to see our house before they did a board and train, and towered over Bryn when he was trying to say hi to her, and she cowered, growled, and ran to the bedroom and wouldn't come out until he left. But that's a situation where, because she's been in socially awkward situations, she thought to herself it was better to get away than it was to act on what might have been really, really bad impulses. Because if you socially pressure, a pit that's not well socialized, I mean, that might be your butt right there. So, there's a lot of these where we give so much to the dogs. We give them our couches, our beds, bones, our food, all of this. They're not taking it in context of my owners love me. They're taking it into context of my subjects will feed me. So once, you don't get to be a peasant and tell me what I can and cannot do. So yeah, spoiling dogs, really, really bad for aggression issues.
I'm with you. I think we could change, in my mind, the wording is almost like teach boundaries and establish rules, because a lot of clients will tell me like, but I'm like, before we start training, before we know each other, like we first meet, and they're like, I don't want to like take away all of his freedom. I still want him to be a dog. And I said, yeah, me too, right? Like, so when I explain, to me, training a dog is about giving more freedom, not less.
Absolutely.
What that means is I trust him enough, I can give him freedom because he's good, but it doesn't mean there's an absence of rules or boundaries or consequences. So my dogs have an insane life, an insanely good life, right? They eat good food. They get a lot of raw meat. They run off leash a lot. They are living like their best life, right? But so you could say, well, that's spoiling, right? But to your point, it's none of what you said. There's consequences. Now, right. I don't let them on the couch in bed because I don't want to have to clean the couch in bed all the time for fur and slobber and whatnot. But, we have rules. They don't go down the stairs ahead of us, right? Because that's dangerous. And they don't pull on leash. And if I say come, you need to come when called. And you don't jump on people. And you don't ever take human food. So we have a very strict, they're not allowed to run in the house. I don't like dogs running through the house wrestling. You want to wrestle, go to the door and I'll let you outside and you can wrestle. So we have a lot of rules and they're not spoiled, but for everyone watching, this doesn't mean you can't give a ton of love. Just like with your children, you can give a ton of love and get them cool things and toys and whatnot without spoiling them. There just needs to be boundaries and consequences and rules in your household. And the idea is we're raising the animal or the child, at least in my opinion, to be able to make smarter decisions on their own and handle what you said, Nelson, like social pressure and other things, right? Be able to handle that pressure without blowing their top and freaking out.
Yeah, and I guess it's a good clarification to being spoiled, because it's not about what you give the dogs, it's what are you giving them for free, so I'm giving you
Yes.
all of this stuff, all of my attention, all of my resources, all of everything that you could ever ask for, without ever expecting that you've worked for it in the slightest, right? And again, humans and dogs, listen, you can spoil kids by giving them the world and never expecting anything, and they're gonna more than likely turn out to be horrible people. Or you can be strict and require a lot, expect a lot from your kids, and because they've achieved those things, give them the world, and those kids are probably going to be awesome. But dogs are the exact same way. So I tell everybody, I am very, very strict with my dogs. I make sure that they are listening and all of this stuff. That's a part of that's their side of the contract. And because they held up their side of the contract, I'll hold up mine with food, love, house, places to run, going off leash to different parks and whatnot, all of that stuff. My dogs go way more places than other people's dogs go.
Oh, go ahead, Alex.
I always have clients ask, like, can I do this? Do you think my dog's ready for this? And I always turn it back on them, and they can almost always answer it themselves. And I go, has the dog earned your trust to do that yet? And as soon as they go, no, you're like, no, I don't think the dog can handle that. There you go. Like, you now work towards it, and work towards that goal. But we find baby steps, get things good, a little better, a little better, a little better. Work towards that. But yeah, they have to earn the trust to do the things that are fun.
For sure. And I would say there's very few lines in the sand I draw with a client where I'm like, no, like, your dog cannot be in bed. I don't care if your dog's in bed with you. Can you get him out? Right?
Yes.
We all see ones you can't, right? But what I always explain is if you're living your life properly with your dog, you can let them do almost anything within reason without an issue if the other stuff is going right. If you let them do everything and you don't train them or establish boundaries, we're Nelson opened this segment, right? Like, that's going to be bad. And something horrible is going to happen at some point. We just don't know what. But if you're doing things right, you're training them properly, living with them properly, couch is fine. Bed is fine. I mean, if you really want to put a spot at your kitchen table and they have their own chair and their dog bowl sits on the table and they eat there, you could do it. Just do everything else well.
You're just going to have to do a lot of extra counter surfing work.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, but that's what I mean when I say spoiling, right? It's giving the rewards and having none of the work to show for.
Sure. 100% agreed. I like that.
Well, we're on to Covey's last point and our controversial one. Ooh. Rescues giving out dogs that aren't right.
I would say, and I'm going to tread lightly here, as lightly as I can.
I won't.
I think rescues are and not every rescues are one of the leading causes of the increase in dog aggression. So I said I'll tread lightly. That doesn't mean I'm going to soften it. That's a pretty bold statement, right? I think rescues, giving the wrong dogs, are one of the leading cause of more aggression of dogs in the country. And it doesn't mean rescues are bad. Both of my dogs are rescues, but I see time after time after time, and it frustrates me to no end. You see these people that don't have dog experience, and they go to a rescue, and they're like, you should take Ralph. He's really cute. And they come home with Ralph. They call me. I go and meet Ralph. And I'm like, they gave you a pit Rottweiler mix? You've never had a dog before. You've got kids. You've got a cat. And this dog was marked as maybe shouldn't be with other dogs, which means he failed his temperament test and he probably would have killed a dog at the shelter. So that's the dog you just got. And you want a pet that you're going to take to the dog park and is going to be great with your sister-in-law's Papillon and all of these things. And I look at him like, this is insane. And this isn't there's good rescues out there, obviously, right? There's rescues I love and we work with a lot. And to me, the ones that do it wrong give the others a bad name. And then the people get this dog and they don't want to give it back because they want to do the right thing and do right by this dog. And the dog attacks another dog or bites their kid or their neighbor. And so much could be prevented by getting the right dog to the right person. So Before I go on, Nelson, you said you weren't going to sugarcoat it. So what's running through your mind?
Um, so I'll go both ways. The grace that I will give a lot of these shelters is that I understand that it's a tough job. You know, you are
Yes.
responsible for these dogs that don't have a home. There's a surplus of homes, and you have to be able to kind of suss that out. So I understand that it's a tough job. The part that I won't go soft on though is passion is not intelligence. You know, passion is not brains. And I will fight that part to the death. That if you are passionate about pit bulls, that doesn't mean everyone needs a pit bull. You know, and that's kind of a common thing for me, right? Is that I think pit bull advocates tend to do more harm. But I mean, that's dogs. Again, that's the whole point of this point right here is that dog advocates tend to do more harm because they're advocating for one specific thing without looking at it as a whole. And so if you have this sweet dog that's, you know, really, really good with you, and therefore you think it's going to be great with other families and stuff like that, you have no idea. And there's probably a lot of questions that you should be asking of what the potential owners, what their lifestyles are going to be like. What kind of weird stuff do they do? Like, oh, nobody comes in through our front door, right? Everybody comes in through the garage. And that's for a lot of dogs, it's probably going to be weird, right? They're going to charge over there because people shouldn't be coming in from the garage, and they're going to have a big issue. So there's weird stuff like that. Some rescues will do a home visit, some rescues won't. But then I'll throw it to the other side and say, again, passion is not brains, and sometimes you get people that are so stringent on what they require from these people of somehow you need to be able to not go to work but afford $100,000. And that's a weird number, but you know, like bulldog rescues, for example, will look at your bank records. Like, you people are weird. I've heard from this one where this lady wouldn't let these people adopt the dog because they smoked. Like, your own personal views on smoking shouldn't deny that dog a home that would have done a good job, right? Like, that's just you being a freaking weirdo.
So, you know what I see though, what is crazy to me is when I deal with clients and they are with a rescue that has those crazy rules that are way too stringent, right? Is they're applying those to like the good, easy dogs.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
for
like,
sure.
you want this lab. Is your yard fenced? How tall is the fence? What kind of fence, what's the gate like? I want to know what your previous vet was like, and for your last dog, and all these things. But then some of these rescues that are adopting out all these more challenging breeds are like, you have $75. All right.
Are you breathing? Cool.
Here's a bulldog pit mix. It's super sweet. You're gonna love it. And it doesn't mean bulldog pit mixes are bad, but I've seen so many clients. I'm like, why did they, like a couple in their 70s, right?
Yep.
And get a pit mix? Like, it doesn't make sense to me, right? If that dog attacks another dog, they're not going to be able to get, or a person, there's no way they can get them off. It just doesn't make sense. And I see it happening so much more and more and more. And I will be clear, both of you guys, my history. I've been on the other side of this, and I know there's been times where I've helped a dog get adopted out that I've been working with that had severe aggression. We got a great handle on it. And you get emotionally attached. You're like, I want to get this dog a home, right? And we wouldn't send him to a home with kids or whatever. But I bet there's been a time where I helped a dog get adopted out years ago that you know what? Maybe that dog shouldn't have gone to that home. And some things you learn from experience, right? I've been doing this since 2006, and I've seen enough cases and enough bad things to realize that this trend of, shop or adopt, don't shop does a lot of harm. And both my dogs are rescues. I love rescues, but there's a time you should be shopping, not adopting, or adopting the right dog for your family. And rescues need to do their part. And I know a lot that do their part, and they're great, but they all need to do their part and help people get the right dog, because I feel like half my aggression cases in this day and age are from people getting the wrong dog from a rescue.
Oh, yeah.
And that, to me, that's obscene. It's just not, it makes no sense.
So for any listeners out there, if you want to go and set up a house call where I meet 10 dogs with you, I would freaking love to do that so that we can have an awesome, dog at the end of this, as opposed to, oh, I saw this one and it looked sad because it was a lineup with 10 other dogs, and now that it came home, it won't let anybody come near me. And like, I probably could have called that there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so tough because the heart's in the right place behind all of this.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah,
for sure.
and it's just like you're in, I guess it's semantics, the passion and intelligence thing. It, like, they mean well, but the reality is you give a dog that is just not right to somebody, like, not only does that dog get failed, but are those people going to get another dog?
They're gonna shop this time, I guarantee.
They're either gonna get pushed to a breeder and they'll never rescue again, or they'll never get a dog again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
it does. Sorry, oh no, go for it.
I had one client many years ago. She got what was it? A smaller dog. Anyway, doesn't matter. This dog was vicious. Thing. It was the hardest dog I ever had to teach heel to. Still to the day, like 8 years later. And she ended up contacting the breeder, and that breeder lit her up. My dogs would never be aggressive. You ruined this dog. And she had this woman crying. I had multiple phone calls with this woman when she was crying, and I told her, she was like, I want to know that trainer's number. I was like, I want to talk to her. You give her my number. She never called me.
Let's have her
She never
on.
called me. She never called me.
Let's have her. Hey, get her on the
absolutely.
podcast. I know it's been 8 years. Let's get her on.
And you know what? I'm pretty dang sure I had a client many years later who was getting a dog, and she had been attacked as a kid, and they didn't have a dog, but they wanted a dog. And they had me, and they wanted to do the right thing, and they picked that breed, and I was like, I've only had one experience with that breed. It was very poor. I'm not going to say the breed in general is awful, but, it wasn't good. And things went wrong, and she contacted, I think it was the same breeder. I'm almost certain. And again, I want to talk to that trainer. And I was like, I think it's the same breeder I dealt with before. Tell her I still want to talk to her. Didn't call.
Yeah.
Barron's breeder's next, okay? We're going to get...
Well,
we're getting him on, too.
I was actually going to say our next topic, we should just add on right now, bad breeders, because I'm surprised it hasn't come up already in this conversation. There's so many there's great breeders, right? Obviously, there's some really good breeders out there, but there's some really bad ones out there. There's a lot of things that make breeders bad. Some are just sort of bad. And by that, I mean, they don't really know what they're doing, and I don't think you should give a first-time dog owner an Akita. I just don't.
Or
so I think a breeder, or Cane Corso, I think a breeder should say, nope, get a lab, right? Or whatever, learn on that, and, then get this dog later. But then there's actually bad breeders. And, we get a lot of questions on the American XL Bully, right? With what's gone on in the UK. And there's been a lot of people killed, right? Like legitimately killed by dogs. And I get a lot of questions from people like, why? Like, why are these dogs doing that? And it's a mixture of things, right? For sure, it's poor socializing. A lot of it, though, is bad breeding. You have drug dealers and scumbags breeding these dogs. And if you want to breed a dog to be aggressive, you can do it. You take the most aggressive dogs from your litter and you breed them again. The aggressive one from this one, the most aggressive female from that one.
That's how we ended up with all these different breeds. You picked things you like. I mean, humanity's been doing it for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, from the advent of wolves.
Sure.
Like, we like those ones that seem to like us. That female, let's get more of them. Let's get more of them.
Nelson couldn't even take a drink of water. I think he had to stop.
That's how real that last line was right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
why can't that be the standard of breeders? Is I like the ones that like me.
Yes. So let's throw some science in there. Have you guys ever seen, so there's a study done, I mean, it's probably 30 years ago at least, on foxes, where they took foxes and...
I thought you told me it was coyotes.
Is it fox or foxes? What's the plural?
Foxes,
right? No.
No.
Fox.
I don't know. I'm going to Google it.
Yeah,
Find that
definitely
out.
Google
So
it, for sure.
they took multiple fox creatures and they bred them together, right? And they
Foxes.
took foxes. Okay, they took the friendliest foxes from from each litter and they bred them together, right? And they had litters and they took the friendliest ones, they bred them together. In a very short amount of time, in the grand scheme of things, I want to say, if I'm remembering right, it was like 20 generations. Their physical characteristics changed. Their ears were no longer pointy. They were starting to droop. Their tails were no longer up. They were starting to stay, down, and they were fairly domesticated in like 20 generations.
This is that Russian
taken
guy,
a wild.
right?
I think it was in Russia.
And
yeah.
he's still and the official, just this fun, I guess, etymology. Domesticated means there is a trackable genetic change. So that you can they have tracked a genetic change in them. And you can I imagine today, given the war, it's harder, but like you could spend a buttload of money and buy a domesticated fox from Russia before the war.
And in 20 generations, if I'm right on that, that's fast, right? That's
Very
not that
fast.
long.
Very
So
fast.
and that's taking a wild animal and domesticating it. So imagine you take a domestic dog that is already a tough breed and you're like, let's see how to make this more aggressive. It doesn't take long before you're breeding killers, and it happens. And in my mind, that's what's happening in the UK. And it's happening for a reason, right? Where like the people say, well, why the XL bully? It's because the UK already banned many other breeds, right? And I think in 1991, their Dangerous Dog Act, they banned the Pit was the big one, but they picked some other breeds like the Tosa, the Fila. I don't know how many Tosas and Filas they had there. The Dogo, I think, like it was those breeds. Why they didn't ban the Rot, I don't know. But whatever, they chose like these breeds, like we're going to ban them. So the American XL Bully became popular, but it didn't become, popular for the right reasons, right? The people, the drug dealers and whatever, the people that are getting these dogs wanted big, aggressive, tough-looking dogs. People found they could make money by breeding them, backyard breeders and do a crappy job of it, and the people like aggressive dogs. So it combined every single, this is actually a very good ending if we sum it up. They combined every single thing we talked about today. Bad breeders, people getting the wrong breed because they don't know how to handle it, they don't socialize it, they don't train it properly, and then big surprise, it's a really bad dog, and it's a dog with a tough genetic history, like just a tough dog, and it's huge, and it's big enough to kill people. And to me, that's what's happened, but that now they've banned the XL Bully, but I think we're probably, tell me if you guys feel differently, I think we're all on the same page that people are just going to invent a new breed.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
You just breed, I mean, there's so many other ones. And
American Mastiff is already starting to rise up.
Over there?
No,
Or
here.
just anywhere? Okay, yeah. So, I don't know. There's not a good answer. Like banning the breeds is not really going to do it because it's the people are doing bad things, right? You have bad people purposely breeding bad dogs, and then you have people getting these dogs, not socializing them, injecting them with steroids, doing all of these things, and then big surprise, this dog killed somebody, right? And these are not family dogs that are doing this, and that's what I think some people don't understand. This is not like a dog from a good breeder that's been raised and trained and socialized properly. These are dogs from bad breeders that have been raised improperly. So then it's like, we never thought this would happen, but every single warning sign pointed to this was going to happen because they did the opposite of everything we've talked about in this episode so far, and they did it with the wrong breed.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. And, that's the extreme bad breeder, right? But then we have the minor bad breeder who's just doesn't know what they're doing, and a dog shows some kind of funky traits, and they're like, well, I'll still breed him because he's super handsome, right? Like, well, he's a white shepherd.
He's gorgeous.
So I have to,
He's so pretty. Look at him.
I have to breed him. Like, how could I not, right? Because he's so handsome.
And then you get the bias of my dog's awesome, so I think there should be more of my dog. But you're not.
I think
really,
you get a lot of that for sure.
Yeah.
If the dog is really awesome, then I can get behind that, right?
Yeah, but it's just like people thinking their kid's the smartest kid because it's their kid.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've all been there.
My kids are smarter than everyone else's.
Yeah, that sucks for everybody else.
I mean, how many clients have you worked with, though, with an aggressive dog that you've been called in? They know it's aggressive, and you're like, you should get this dog neutered. And they're like, well, I don't want to. I'd like to breed him. And you're like, wait, what? Like, he attacked somebody, and you want to add more of this to the gene pool of the breed? I don't get it. That doesn't make sense. You should breed the really stable one, not the one who attacked your friend.
I'm telling you, we should bring back the standard. If they like me, I will breed them. That seems like a
well,
super
that dog
easy
probably
standard.
liked his owner. He just hated everyone else.
That's fair.
But it is, sometimes it's not bad people, right? Like the XL bully breeders in the UK, a lot of them are legitimately bad people, right?
Probably.
But a lot of the breeders in other places aren't necessarily bad people. They're just making probably not the best decisions, right? And are breeding a dog that's not Cujo, but it's not the best example of the breed.
Yeah. And
I'd get an XL bully because I think they're gorgeous. I think they're awesome.
Get one.
But I would do really
They are
well
cool.
with it, right? Again, they
You-
tend
you
to
are
have a
equipped.
slightly more dominant, personality that would work well for me. So I'm getting the right breed and obviously socializing. I could socialize a dog on accident with our job, right? So that's not socializing isn't the tough part for us.
no,
So.
no, it's not.
It is something for sure. So I hope they figure it out over there. And I don't know what the answer is. And I'm not a fan of big government by any stretch of the imagination, but I do feel like at some point in time, government's going to have to regulate breeders because, and hopefully it's not a federal government. I'd much rather see
Smaller,
it be the
yeah.
state or something besides the
Or just
the
a
feds.
culture, and if anything,
well,
that's kind of one of
yes.
the problems that I do have. I'm not going to dive into adopt don't shop, but realistically, adopt don't shop does also really takes a lot off of breeders, and if most people aren't stringent on what breeders they're going to, then the culture of holding them accountable goes away, right? And then you really do get a ton of backyard breeders and people that don't necessarily know what they're doing.
Well, we've seen, I mean, there's been the big rise in that over the last 20 years. I mean, Covey, you've said this to me before. Like 30 years ago, it would be difficult to get two puppies from the same litter from a
Yeah.
breeder. And we see it all the time now. And it's not
For
the
sure.
foregone conclusion that littermate syndrome will happen, and and even if it does, it's going to be the worst. But why chance it? Wait a year, get another. It's going to be easier
Yeah.
on you anyways for housebreaking and all that stuff.
I don't think breeders do themselves any favors there, or the people that are getting the dogs. And I agree with Nelson. I mean, we need a change in culture. I just feel like it's not going to happen.
That's fair.
Right. If we could get rid of bad people, that'd be really cool. But I think you're going to have people now that they've figured out. Like I've had some people tell me like the new Dangerous Dog Act that they've added the XL bully. It's going to work because the other one worked for 20 years or 91 till now, whatever, 30 years. But it didn't, right? It just, people still had pits. There were definitely less deaths for a while, but the evidence is not conclusive. And even I've looked at the transcripts from their House of Lords in the UK, and there's a lot of evidence that it didn't really work at all. It just, blew up lately with the bully. Now that people have found out how easy it is to make a new breed, the next iteration is going to happen faster.
Oh, yeah.
So the argument, like, this was good for 30 years. So if we get another 30 years and then we add one more breed, that's good. It's not going to work like that. The new iteration is happening now, and it's going to be out there soon, and it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. There wasn't all that information on the internet 30 years ago that anybody could access like that. Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to see it. And you see it happen, you're like, oh, we can make a breed. And you think the people that were breeding the XL bullies, presumably, like, let's assume they quit breeding XL bullies. You think they're going to be like, well, I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to breed these aggressive dogs anymore and sell them for a bunch of money to drug dealers. No, they're just going to figure out how to not,
Just gonna get around it.
disobey the law or not get caught. So I don't think there's a good answer there. And it doesn't do any of the breeds any good. In some of the breeders that have good intentions that adopt or send out the wrong dogs, they hurt the breed. And you mentioned earlier, Nelson, dog advocates and pit bull owners that can't ever see. For some reason, it's only pit bull owners. I don't know why.
No, you get out of here with that nonsense.
But the dog breed advocates that are like they can't see anything wrong with their breed. Like, what is wrong with you? Some breeds are more predisposed to certain actions, and you don't help your breed by burying your head in the sand. You harm your breed over and over and over again.
Occasionally.
Nelson, I might have poked a bear with a stick. Now let's see
Yeah,
what Nelson has
same.
to say to that.
Well, I mean, it's very easily dispelled. Okay, take a Rottweiler and go to Home Depot, and then take a pit bull and go to Home Depot. And if you take a pit bull to Home Depot, you might not even make it in. However, if you take a Rottweiler to Home Depot, all of a sudden, anyone over the age of like 35 is going to come to you with some kind of magical Rottweiler that they had growing up, which mathematically is just not possible. Like, we're not in the biggest town in the world, buddy. There's no way all of you guys had Rottweilers as well. But yeah, you can't go anywhere with a Rottweiler without having 10 people come up to you and like, I had a Rottweiler when I was, oh, they're magical, and oh, they're therapeutic, and all this nonsense. I can't think of who it is. Is it Larry Cohn? I think that he's always kind of advocating that Rottweilers are perfect therapy dogs. You know, like, he's not crazy to the 10th degree like everybody else is. You know, he realizes that training is definitely, you know, balance training is the way to do it, but everybody will go crazy off of a breed. There are still 70-year-old women in Elgin that are walking around with their German Shepherds. And so everybody gets crazy on their breeds and will fight to the death everybody else.
Fun story, kind of going back to outliers and now German Shepherds. I had a German Shepherd I trained. It was the biggest German Shepherd I ever trained, over 100 pounds, fit over 100 pounds, and this dog would full-blown Cujo any car driving by. Its owners were like 70 for the woman and like 80 for the guy, and it was really tough. This dog was hard for me to handle. So that was the big thing. Another thing was the dog was bad at the vet. So I called the vet while I had this dog for board and train, and I said, I'm a trainer, we have a mutual client, I heard it was bad. I was wondering if there was any days next week where anybody would be free for me to come in and just kind of, you know, just maybe do a quick mock exam, physical. And they were all about it. And so actually made a lot more progress with the vet than the cars, but took the dog. The vet was very impressed, very happy with how much better the dog was doing and stuff. And then she started talking to me and she was like, so let me ask you something. Did you think they had an odd expectation of what a German Shepherd was? And I was like, yeah, definitely. And she was like, yep, I've been their vet for this dog and their past 2 German Shepherds. Their last 2 German Shepherds were golden retrievers. So these poor people, like, I just like, and so I'm doing the math. I'm like, okay, so you're like 45, 50 years old, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get a German Shepherd, and you just have, what do you call it, Covey? The natural. You just have the natural, and you're like, oh, this is the best dog. I'm gonna get another, and then you get another German Shepherd, and it's a natural, and you're like, yeah, and then you get the hardest German Shepherd that a trainer 9 years has ever had. Like, oh my, like, these poor people, like, just such a rough situation. Like, gosh. But yeah,
Gotta get the right breed.
Yeah.
You know, I still want to circle back and just tell Nelson he's wrong. You go to someone who has a Cane Corso and you say, I don't think everyone should have this breed.
And you say, I don't think you should get a third one.
So you go to some of the Cane Corso and you're like, I don't think everybody should have this breed. I heard that they're a tough breed and they can be a little aggressive. I would wager the vast majority of those owners would say, agreed, you've got to be a really good handler and a really good owner to have one. And I would wager you go to a lot, pit bulls have more owners that if you were to say, you know, you have to be a little more aware of them with other dogs. And they'd be like, my dog is perfect with other dogs. That's the media and that's anti-pit bull people, and it's not true. And I feel that the most from that breed in particular. And, you know, I don't have anything against the breed. I like pits. Sure. But I feel like that breed brings out so many, like, the advocates have latched on to that breed. And I think it's because there's so many in the shelter that then the people that really want to adopt, and they can't say there's anything wrong with them, because if they do, then people won't adopt them anymore.
This isn't going to be fun if I can't dispel your point, okay? If you're just going to dispel yourself.
So, wait, are you disagreeing with what I just said?
Kind of, yeah. So,
Okay, let's hear it.
not what you just said. I agree with what you just said. Your point is wrong, obviously, though. So if you go to a Cane Corso owner and you say, I don't think that this dog should go to just anybody, first they'll be like, let me get this dog off of my own arm first, okay? And then let me show you pictures of the next puppy that I'm going to get. So if anything, just Cane Corso owners don't seem to learn the lesson, is what I would throw out there. But I think you're absolutely right in the fact that there's not a ton of Cane Corsos, which means that there's not a ton of breeders because there's not a ton of demand. I think advocates latched on to pit bulls because they were getting hate, and everybody loves an underdog kind of story. And then the advocates really screwed the breed. And I mean, this is true through history, right? I mean, you could say the same thing about Rots, Shepherds, Dobermans, like
Anything that
talk
gets
to anybody.
popular. Anything
That gets popular.
How many crazy doodles have we trained?
Doodles.
Crazy doodles. Crazy.
And praise the Lord that we don't see any, Cocker Spaniels anymore, but they had their time to shine. So I really think it's that crazy people latch on to what is getting hate and then stop holding, this is going to be weird, right? But stop holding the breed accountable. Listen, if you get a pit bull,
it's not the dog, it's the owner.
Kind of, but sometimes it's the dog.
Sometimes
Listen,
it's
man,
the dog.
I've met a lot of pits
Sometimes
that
it's the
are
dog.
huge D-bags.
Sometimes it's the dog.
Yeah, and if the culture, what I mean by culture, you could even just do this financially, right? If we paid more for good pits, we would get more good pits because all of the breeders would have to step their game up in order to get the bag. And that's not happening right now, right? There's a huge abundance in the shelters that are pits, and therefore you could have a dog that has some blocky head, but is primarily golden retriever. And they're like, all pit bulls are awesome. Because it's not a dog, guys, okay? Pit bulls are angels. Just in case you didn't know. They're not real dogs.
So for the record, I am definitely not in favor of any sort of pit bull ban, and I'm not anti-pit bull.
I think we're all agreed with that.
To me, they're just like many other breeds that I think the average person or first-time dog owner should not get. And what frustrates me is when people act like that's not true with that particular breed. And and maybe there's some other breeds we might have to agree to disagree on that. But like for my dogs, I opened with, I don't think a first-time dog owner should get any of the mixes that my dogs are.
Yeah.
Or my last dog before was an American Bulldog. Shouldn't get that first dog. I had a Mastiff mix. Should not get that for your first dog. There's, a lot of them. It doesn't mean we don't like them or they're bad. And what I don't like is how many rescues are pushing pits onto people that have no dog experience and are telling them, like, this is a great dog. You're going to be fine. And we don't really know if it's a great dog.
By pits, don't you mean lab mixes?
Lab mixes?
So we won't name names, but I'm assuming there's a lot of rescues, but I can think of one in particular. Nelson, I know you know this group, that they won't admit any dog they have is a pit. And we've been next to them at events, and you're like, oh, this it's a cute dog. Like, in a nice way. They're like, this is not a pit. This is a lab mix. And you're like, well, he's 75 pounds, and he's like 12 inches tall. His ears are cropped. His muscles, his chest is like this.
Somehow he's naturally glistening. I don't know what's going on.
Right. But okay, I don't care what you call him. And that is a problem, right? Because how many clients have we seen that get a dog and you're like, oh, I like your dog. So what'd they tell you? He's like pit mix, maybe some whatever in there. And they're like, no, he's a lab. And then you're like, where did you hear that? Like, the rescue said he was a lab mix. I'm like, wow, he looks exactly like a pit bull. And I've had some clients freak out.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, for sure.
First lesson, they're like, but I've got grandkids. I'm like, well, let's slow down, right? Yeah. I'm very confident this is a pit mix, but I'm not very confident he's aggressive with children. We don't know anything about him yet. Let's figure that out before you freak out. But we can be cautious for sure. But you should be cautious if you adopt a lab mix and you have grandkids in the house.
If there's
So
kids,
it
you should
doesn't-
be cautious.
right.
I'm gonna
So-
go out on a limb and just piss everybody off. If you have young children under the age of 10, you probably should be shopping, not adopting. That's not to say that you can't adopt an awesome puppy, but even then, go for a puppy, right? But if you have young kids, you are probably better off going for a young puppy as opposed to a 9-month-old lab mix.
When friends and family, I don't talk like this to clients. When friends and family and they haven't had a dog and they're like, we're thinking about getting a dog. We want to get. I cut them off. I was like, you want a lab or golden? And they're like, but you think that dog looks cool, but in terms of temperament and behavior, you want a lab or golden. That's what you want. It's like, now, I'm not saying you have to, but in your mind, what you think a dog is a lab or golden. Like if you haven't owned one before.
Agreed 100%. And then to Nelson's point, agreed that someone with young kids, in my opinion, should be getting a puppy without a doubt, so they can raise it properly and know how this dog is around resources and all of those things. And, like being a dog advocate, it depends how you phrase that, right? And I mean, how you define that phrase. But I'm much more of a believer in humans first, dogs second. I like dogs a lot. That's why I've dedicated my life to them. And we have dogs, and we always will have dogs. But humans have to come first. And if dog advocate means you think dog before human, that's a problem. And when I have any client or any friend or family and they're going to adopt a dog, yes, there's some adult dogs in the shelter that are probably great. And there's a very good chance they'd be incredible. You'd have a good life together. I don't think you should take that risk with a young child in the house. So I agree with you completely, Nelson. Even if it's 1%, I'm sorry for that dog that he's in the shelter and that's not good. And I wish he wasn't there, but you can't save them all. And you need to worry more about your child's safety than you do about, getting that dog and doing him a favor. And it sucks for the dogs that are in there because, but we need to fix it not by taking them out of the shelter. We need to prevent them from going there in the first place is the key. And
Spay and neuter
back
your
to-
pets, folks. Spay and neuter.
Yes, spay and neuter. And Nelson volunteered earlier to fix the culture.
Oh yeah, now
I
get
did.
on it.
Yeah, I'll take that
When-
on. So
when we fix culture. But I honestly, like, all this stuff like that we've talked about today and like these videos you've shown, and I mean, all of it, if people did these things, there would be less dogs in the shelter. If they got the right breed, right? And there were good breeders out there that weren't backyard breeders and they raised them right, you'd have less dogs in the shelter and you'd have less people feeling guilty and feeling like they need to adopt that 6-year-old mixed breed that they don't know anything about, with a young child in the house.
again, I think, I guess for starters, I definitely think that we could fix the dog problem before the human problem, right?
Yes.
But the same thing goes that if we could make it okay to talk about breeders and to look for good breeders, you'd be able to suss out all of the crappy breeders and make sure they don't get paid. Then nobody's going to waste their time with a low value outcome. If I have to, I have to raise these dogs, I have to do all of this stuff, go through the vet bills, go through the food, all of that stuff to make $30, $100, maybe even,
Can I
it's not
interject a
worth it.
question?
Go for it.
Have you been taking economics classes? The low value outcome was pretty highbrow, highfalutin, I think is
Vocabulary.
No, that's how I naturally talk that way.
It's just how I talk.
But tell me that that's not a real thing, right?
Oh, I
one of the
agree,
big things
100%.
about adopting dogs for the average owners isn't a moral question. It's the fact that I can get a dog for $70.
Yep.
And they'll come with a free bag of food for the first batch, right? If you made it, if you made it just that much that you're going to make more money by being a really good breeder and caring about genetics and caring about temperaments and stuff like that, you would stop the huge problem that we have with homeless dogs.
Maybe that should be one of our next episodes is we're going to solve it for everybody.
There you go.
Suburban K9 fixes the world.
All right. Well, I don't know. I feel like we've kind of come full circle here. We've covered a lot. Any last words? If not, I would say to anyone watching, hopefully this is helpful to you. We've got a lot more episodes to come. We've obviously got a lot of other videos on our channel. The goal is all of this stuff is just meant to help you raise the right dog or fix problems when you're having them. The idea is that you can live in harmony with your dog and have fun, right? And life doesn't suck and nobody gets hurt. So follow all the stuff in this video, all these things we've talked about, watch our other videos, and definitely subscribe so you are alerted when our next videos come out. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.